Hello again, it's Mr. Carbis here, and today we're going to look at Roald Dahl and George's Maps of Medicine. It was requested by somebody, and also it's quite topical at the moment. There is a disclaimer in the story, which is, do not try to make this marvellous medicine yourselves at home. If you want to make your own concoctions or potions, that's fine to do it with adult consent. But yeah, what George gets up to is actually quite dangerous. So please don't try this yourself without adult supervision. Grandma. I'm going shopping in the village, George's mother said to George on Saturday morning. So be a good boy and don't get up to mischief. Well, this was a silly thing to say to a small boy at any time. It immediately made him wonder what sort of mischief he might get up to. And don't forget to give Grandma her medicine at 11 o'clock, the mother said. And out she went, closing the back door behind her. Grandma, who was dozing in her chair by the window, opened one wicked little eye and said, "Now you heard what your mother said, George. Don't forget my medicine." "No, Grandma," George said. "And just try to behave yourself for once while she's away." "Yes, Grandma," George said. George was bored to tears. He didn't have a brother or a sister. His father was a farmer, and the family lived almost miles away from anywhere. So there were never any children to play with. He was tired of staring at pigs and hens and cows and sheep. He was especially tired of having to live in the same house as that grizzly old grunion of a grandma. Looking after her all by himself was hardly the most exciting way to spend a Saturday morning. "You can make me a nice cup of tea for a start," Grandma said to George. "That'll keep you out of mischief for a few minutes." "Yes, Grandma," George said. George couldn't help disliking Grandma. She was a selfish, grumpy old woman. She had pale brown teeth and a small, puckered-up mouth like a dog's bottom. "How much sugar in your tea today, Grandma?" George asked her. "1 spoon," she said, "and no milk." Most grandmothers are lovely, kind, helpful old ladies, but not this one. She spent all day and every day sitting in her chair by the window. She was always complaining, grousing, grouching, grumbling, griping about something or other. Never once, even on her best days, had she smiled at George and said, "Well, how are you this morning, George?" Or, "Why don't you and I have a game of snakes and ladders?" Or, "How was school today?" She didn't seem to care about other people, only about herself. She was a miserable old grouch. George went into the kitchen and made Grandma a cup of tea with a tea bag. He put 1 spoon of sugar in it and no milk. He stirred the sugar well and carried the cup into the living room. Grandma sipped the tea. "It's not sweet enough," she said. "Put more sugar in." George took the cup back to the kitchen and added another spoonful of sugar. He stirred it again and carried it carefully into Grandma. "Where's the saucer?" she said. "I won't have a cup without a saucer." George fetched her a saucer. "And what about a teaspoon, if you please?" "I've stirred it for you, Grandma. I stirred it well. "I'll stir my own tea, thank you very much," she said. "Fetch me a teaspoon." George fetched her a teaspoon. When George's mother or father were home, Grandma never ordered George about like this. It was only when she had him on her own that she began treating him badly. "You know what's the matter with you?" the old woman said, staring at George over the rim of the teacup with those bright, wicked little eyes. "You're growing too fast. Boys who grow too fast become stupid and lazy." "But I can't help it if I'm growing fast, Grandma," George said. "Of course you can," she snapped. "Growing's a nasty, childish habit." "But we have to grow, Grandma. If we didn't grow, we'd never be grown-ups." "Rubbish, boy, rubbish," she said. "Look at me. Am I growing? Certainly not." "But you did once, Grandma."
"Only very little,"
the old woman answered.
"I gave up growing when I was extremely small, along with all the other nasty childish habits like laziness and disobedience and greed and sloppiness and untidiness and stupidity. You haven't given up any of these things, have you?"
"Still only a little boy, Grandma."
"You're 8 years old," she snorted. "That's old enough to know better. If you don't stop growing soon, it'll be too late."
"Too late for what, Grandma?"
"It's ridiculous," she went on. "You're nearly as tall as me already."
George took a good look at Grandma. She certainly was a very tiny person. Her legs were so short she had to have a footstool to put her feet on, and her head only came halfway up the back of the armchair. "Daddy says it's fine for a man to be tall," George said.
"Don't listen to your daddy," Grandma said. "Listen to me."
"But how do I stop myself growing?" George asked her.
"Eat less chocolate," Grandma said.
"Does chocolate make you grow?"
"It makes you go the wrong way," she snapped. "Up instead of down."
Grandma sipped some tea, but never took her eyes from the little boy who stood before her.
"Never grow up," she said. "Always down."
"Yes, Grandma."
"And stop eating chocolate. Eat cabbage instead."
"Cabbage? Ugh, no, I don't like cabbage," George said.
"It's not what you like or what you don't like," Grandma snapped. "It's what's good for you that counts. From now on, you must eat cabbage 3 times a day. Mountains of cabbage. And if it's got caterpillars in it, so much the better."
"Ouch," George said.
"Caterpillars give you brains,"
the old woman said. "Mummy washes them down the sink," George said.
"Mummy's as stupid as you are," Grandma said. "Cabbage doesn't taste of anything without a few boiled caterpillars in it. Slugs, too."
"Not slugs!" George cried out. "I couldn't eat slugs."
"Whenever I see a live slug on a piece of lettuce," Grandma said, "I gobble it up quick before it crawls away. Delicious."
She squeezed her lips together tight so that her mouth became a tiny wrinkled hole.
"Delicious," she said again. worms and slugs and beetly bugs. You don't know what's good for you.
You're joking, Grandma.
I never joke, she said. Beetles are perhaps best of all. They go crunch.
Grandma, that's beastly. The old hag grinned, showing those pale brown teeth.
Sometimes, if you're lucky, she said, you get a beetle inside the stem of a stick of celery. That's what I like.
Grandma, how could you?
You find all sorts of nice things in sticks of raw celery, the old woman went on. Sometimes it's earwigs.
I don't want to hear about it, cried George.
A big fat earwig is very tasty, Grandma said, licking her lips. But you've got to be very quick, my dear. When you put one of those in your mouth, it has a pair of sharp nippers on its back end. And if it grabs your tongue with those, it never lets go. So you've got to bite the earwig first. Chop, chop, before it bites you.
George started edging towards the door. He wanted to get as far away as possible from this filthy old woman.
You're trying to get away from me, aren't you? She said, pointing a finger straight at George's face. You're trying to get away from Grandma.
Little George stood by the door, staring at the old hag in the chair. She stared back at him. Could it be, George wondered, that she was a witch? He had always thought witches were only in fairy tales, but now he was not so sure.
Come closer to me, little boy, she said, beckoning to him with a horny finger. Come closer to me and I will tell you secrets.
George didn't move. Grandma didn't move either.
I know a great many secrets, she said,
and suddenly she smiled. It was a thin, icy smile, the kind a snake might make just before it bites you.
Come over here to Grandma and she'll whisper secrets to you.
George took a step backwards, edging closer to the door.
You mustn't be frightened of your old Grandma,
she said, smiling that icy smile. George took another step backwards.
Some of us, she said,
and all at once she was leaning forward in a chair and whispering in a throaty sort of voice George had never heard her use before.
Some of us, she said, have magic powers that can twist the creatures of this earth into wondrous shapes.
A tingle of electricity flashed down the length of George's spine. He began to feel frightened.
Some of us, the old woman went on, have fire on our tongues, sparks in our bellies, and wizardry in the tips of our fingers. Some of us know secrets that would make your hair stand straight up on end and your eyes pop out of their sockets.
George wanted to run away, but his feet seemed stuck to the floor.
We know how to make your nails drop off and teeth grow out of your fingers instead.
George began to tremble. It was the face that frightened him most of all. That frosty smile, the brilliant, unblinking eyes.
We know how to have you wake up in the morning with a long tail coming out from behind you.
Grandma, he cried out, stop!
We know secrets, my dear, about dark places where dark things live and squirm and sliver all over each other.
George made a dive for the door.
It doesn't matter how far you run, he heard her saying. You won't ever get away.
George ran into the kitchen, slamming the door behind him. The marvellous plan. While George sat himself down at the table in the kitchen, he was shaking a little. Oh, how he hated Grandma. He really hated that horrid old witchy woman. And all of a sudden, he had a tremendous urge to do something about her. Something whopping, something absolutely terrific, a real shocker. A sort of explosion. He wanted to blow away that witchy smell that hung about her in the next room. He may have been only 8 years old, but he was a brave little boy. He was ready to take this old woman on. I'm not going to be frightened by her, he said softly to himself. But he was frightened. And that's why he wanted to suddenly explode her away. Well, not quite away. But he did want to shake the old woman up a bit. Very well then. What should it be, this whopping, terrific, exploding shocker for Grandma? He would have liked to put a firework banger under a chair. But he didn't have one. He would have liked to put a long green snake down the back of her dress. But he didn't have a long green snake. He would have liked to put 6 big black rats in the room with her and lock the door. But he didn't have the 6 big black rats. As George sat there, pondering this interesting problem, his eye fell upon the bottle of Grandma's brown medicine, standing on the sideboard. Rotten stuff it seemed to be. 4 times a day a large spoonful of it was shovelled into her mouth. It didn't do her the slightest bit of good. She was always just as horrid after she'd had it as she'd been before. The whole point of medicine, surely, was to make a person better. If it didn't do that, then it was quite useless. So ho, thought George suddenly. Aha, ho hum! I know exactly what I'll do. I shall make her a new medicine. One that is so strong and so fierce and so fantastic. It will either cure her completely or blow off the top of her head. I'll make her a magic medicine, a medicine no doctor in the world has ever made before. George looked at the kitchen clock. It said 10:05. There was nearly an hour left before Grandma's next dose was due, at 11. Here we go then, cried George, jumping up from the table. A magic medicine, it shall be. So give me a bug and a jumping flea, give me 2 snails and lizards 3, and a slimy squiggler from the sea, and the poisonous sting of a bumblebee, and the juice from the fruit of the jujube tree, and the powdered bone of a wombat's knee, and 100 other things as well, each with a rather nasty smell. I'll stir them up, I'll boil them long, a mixture tough, a mixture strong. And then, hey-ho, and down it goes. A nice big spoonful, hold your nose. Just gulp it down, and have no fear. How do you like it, Granny dear? Will she go pop? Will she explode? Will she go flying down the road? Will she go poof in a puff of smoke? Start fizzing like a can of Coke? Who knows? Not I. Let's wait and see. I'm glad it's neither you nor me. Oh, Grandma, if you only knew what I've got in store for you. George begins to make the medicine. George took an enormous saucepan out of the cupboard and placed it on the kitchen table.
George! Came the shrill voice from the next room. What are you doing?
Nothing, Grandma, he called out.
You needn't think I can't hear you just because you closed the door. You're rattling the saucepans.
I'm just tidying the kitchen, Grandma. Then there was silence. George had absolutely no doubt whatsoever about how he was going to make his famous medicine. He wasn't going to fool about wondering whether to put in little bits of this or a little bit of that. Quite simply, he was going to put in everything he could find. There'd be no messing about, no hesitating, no wondering whether a particular thing would knock the old girl sideways or not. The rule would be this. Whatever he saw, if it was runny, or powdery, or gooey, in it went. Nobody had ever made a medicine like that before. If it didn't actually cure Grandma, then it would anyway cause some exciting results. It would be worth watching. George decided to work his way round the various rooms one at a time and see what they had to offer. He would go first to the bathroom. There were always lots of funny things in a bathroom. So upstairs he went, carrying the enormous two-handled saucepan before him. In the bathroom, he gazed longingly at the famous and dreaded medicine cupboard. But he didn't go near it. It was the only thing in the entire house he was forbidden to touch. He had made solemn promises to his parents about this, and he wasn't going to break them. There were things in there, they had told him, that could actually kill a person. And though he was out to give Grandma a pretty fiery mouthful, he didn't really want a dead body on his hands. George put the saucepan on the floor and went to work. Number 1 was a bottle labelled Golden Gloss Hair Shampoo. He emptied it into the pan. That ought to wash her tummy nice and clean, he said. He took a full tube of toothpaste and squeezed out the whole lot of it in one long worm. Maybe that will brighten up those horrid brown teeth of hers, he said. There was an aerosol can of super foam shaving soap belonging to his father. George loved playing with aerosols. He pressed the button and kept his finger on it until there was nothing left. A wonderful mountain of white foam built up in the giant saucepan. With his fingers, he scooped out the contents of a jar of vitamin-enriched face cream. In went a small bottle of scarlet nail varnish. If the toothpaste doesn't clean her teeth, George said, then this will paint them as red as roses. He found another jar of creamy stuff labelled hair remover. Smear it on your legs, it said, and allow to remain for 5 minutes. George tipped it all into the saucepan. There was a bottle with yellow stuff inside it called Dishwolf's Famous Dandruff Cure. In it went. There was something called Brilliant for Cleaning False Teeth. It was a white powder. In that went too. He found another aerosol can. Nevermore Ponking Deodorant Spray. Guaranteed, it said, to keep away unpleasant body smells for a whole day. She could use plenty of that, George said, as he sprayed the entire canful into the saucepan. Liquid paraffin, the next one was called. It was a big bottle. He hadn't the faintest idea what it did to you, but he poured it in anyway. That, he thought, looking around him, was about all from the bathroom. On his mother's dressing table in the bedroom, George found yet another lovely aerosol can. Oh, it was called Helga's Hair Set. Hold 12 inches away from the hair and spray lightly. He squirted the whole lot into the saucepan. He did enjoy squirting these aerosols. There was a bottle of perfume called Flower of Turnips. It smelled of old cheese. Oof. In it went. And in too went a large round box of powder. It was called Pink Plaster. There was a powder puff on top, and he threw that in as well, just for luck. He found a couple of lipsticks. He pulled the greasy red things out of their little cases and added them to the mixture. Well, the bedroom had nothing more to offer, so George carried the enormous saucepan downstairs again and trotted into the laundry room where the shelves were full of all kinds of household items. The first one he took down was a large box of super white for atomic washing machines dirt, it said, will disappear like magic. George didn't know whether Grandma was automatic or not, but she was certainly a dirty old woman. So she'd better have it all, he said, tipping in the whole boxful. Then there was a big tin of Waxwell floor polish. It removes filth and foul masses from your floor and leaves everything shiny bright, it said. George scooped the orange-coloured waxy stuff out of the tin and plonked it into the pan. There was a round cardboard carton labelled flea powder for dogs. Keep well away from the dog's food, it said, because this powder, if eaten, will make the dog explode. Good, said George, pouring it all into the saucepan. He found a box of canary seed on the shelf. Perhaps it'll make the old bird sing, he said, and in it went. Next, George explored the box with shoe cleaning materials, brushes and tins and dusters. Well now, he thought, Grandma's medicine is brown, so my medicine must also be brown, or she'll smell a rat. The way to colour it, he decided, would be with brown shoe polish. The large tin he chose was labelled dark tan. Splendid! He scooped it all out with an old spoon and plopped it into the pan. He would stir it up later. On his way back to the kitchen, George saw a bottle of gin standing on the sideboard. Grandma was very fond of gin. She was allowed to have a small nip of it every evening. Now he would give her a treat. He would pour in the whole bottle. He did. Back in the kitchen, George put the huge saucepan on the table and went over to the cupboard that served as a larder. The shelves were bulging with bottles and jars of every sort. He chose the following and emptied them one by one into the saucepan. A tin of curry powder, a tin of mustard powder, a bottle of extra hot chili sauce, a tin of black peppercorns, a bottle of horseradish sauce. There, he said aloud. That should do it. George! Came the screechy voice from the next room.
Who are you talking to in there? What are you up to?
Nothing, Grandma. Absolutely nothing, he called back.
Is it time for my medicine yet?
No, Grandma. Not for about half an hour.
Well, just see you don't forget it.
I won't, Grandma, George answered. I promise I won't. Animal pills. At this point, George suddenly had an extra good wheeze. Although the medicine cupboard in the house was forbidden ground, what about the medicines his father kept on the shelf in the shed next to the hen house? The animal medicines. What about those? Nobody had ever told him he mustn't touch them. Let's face it, George said to himself. Hairspray and shaving cream and shoe polish are all very well, and they will no doubt cause some splendid explosions inside the old geezer. But what about the magic mixture? But what the magic mixture needs now is a touch of the real stuff, real pills and real tonics to give it punch and muscle. George picked up the heavy 3/4 full saucepan and carried it out the back door. He crossed the farmyard and headed straight for the shed alongside the hen house. He knew his father wouldn't be there. He was out haymaking in one of the meadows. George entered the dusty old shed and put the saucepan on the bench. Then he looked up at the medicine shelf. There were 5 big bottles there. 2 were full of pills, 2 were full of runny stuff, and 1 was full of powder. I'll use them all, George said. Grandma needs them. Boy, does she need them. The first bottle he took down contained an orange-coloured powder. The label said, for chickens with foul pest, hen gripe, sore beaks, gammy legs, coccollitis, egg trouble, broodingness, or loss of feathers. Mix 1 spoonful only with each bucket of feed. Well, George said aloud to himself as he tipped in the whole bottleful, the old bird won't be losing any feathers after she's had a dose of this. The next bottle he took down had about 500 gigantic purple pills in it. For horses with horse throats, it said on the label. The horse-throated horse should suck 1 pill twice a day. Grandma might not have a horse throat, George said, but she's certainly got a sharp tongue. Maybe they'll cure that instead. Into the saucepan went the 500 gigantic purple pills. Then there was a bottle of thick, yellowish liquid. For cows, bulls and bullocks, the label said. Will cure cowpox, cow mange, crumpled horns, bad breath in bulls, earache, toothache, headache, hoofrache, tailache, and sore udders. That grumpy old cow in the living room has every one of these rotten illnesses, George said. She'll need it all, with a slop and a gurgle. The yellow liquid splashed into the now nearly full saucepan. The next bottle contained a brilliant red liquid. Sheep dip, it said on the label. For sheep with sheep rot and for getting rid of ticks and fleas. Mix 1 spoonful in 1 gallon of water and slosh it over the sheep. Caution, do not make the mixture any stronger or the wool will fall out and the animal will be naked. By gum, said George, how I'd love to walk in and slosh it all over old Grandma. Watch the ticks and fleas go jumping off her. But I can't. I mustn't. So she'll have to drink it instead. He poured the bright red medicine into the saucepan. The last bottle on the shelf was full of pale green pills. Pig pills, the label announced, for pigs with pork prickles, tender trotters, bristle blight and swine sickness. Give 1 pill per day. In severe cases, 2 pills may be given. But more than that will make the pig rock and roll. Just the stuff, said George, for that miserable old pig back in there in the house. She'll need a very big dose. So he tipped all the green pills, plop, 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 hundreds and hundreds of them, into the saucepan. There was an old stick lying on the bench that has been used for stirring paint. George picked it up and started to stir his marvellous concoction. The mixture was as thick as cream, and as he stirred and stirred, many wonderful colours rose up from the depths and blended together. Pinks and blues, greens, yellows and browns. George went on stirring until it was all well mixed. But even so, there were still hundreds of pills lying on the bottom that hadn't melted. And there was his mother's splendid powder puff floating on the surface. I shall have to boil it all up, George said. 1 good quick boil on the stove is all it needs. And with that he staggered back towards the house with the enormous heavy saucepan. On the way he passed the garage, so he went in to see if he could find any other interesting things. He added the following: 1/2 pint of engine oil to keep Grandma's engine going smoothly, some antifreeze to keep her radiator from freezing up in winter, a handful of grease to grease her creaking joints, and then back to the kitchen. The cook-up. In the kitchen, George put the saucepan on the stove and turned up the gas flame underneath it as high as it would go.
George!
cried the awful voice from the next room.
It's time for my medicine!
Not yet, Grandma, George called back. There's still 20 minutes before 11 o'clock.
What mischief are you up to in there now? Granny screeched. I hear noises.
George thought it just best to not answer this one. He found a long wooden spoon in the kitchen drawer and began stirring hard. The stuff in the pot got hotter and hotter. Soon the marvellous mixture began to froth and foam. A rich blue smoke, the colour of peacocks, rose from the surface of the liquid, and a fiery, fearsome smell filled the kitchen. It made George choke and splutter. It was a smell unlike any he'd smelled before. It was a brutal and bewitching smell, spicy and staggering, fierce and frenzied, full of wizardry and magic. Whenever he got a whiff of it up his nose, firecrackers went off in his skull, and electric prickles ran along the backs of his legs. It was wonderful to stand there stirring this amazing mixture, and to watch it smoking blue and bubbling and frothing and foaming, as though it were alive. At one point, he could have sworn he saw bright sparks flashing in the swirling foam. And suddenly, George found himself dancing around the steaming pot, chanting strange words that came into his head out of nowhere. Fiery broth and witch's brew, foamy froth and witch's blue, fume and spume and spoondrift spray, fizzle, swizzle, shout hooray! Watch it sloshing, swashing, sploshing, hear it hissing, squishing, spissing. Grandma, better start to pray. We're going to stop the story right there. Now, our topic work, we're going to be looking at the dangers of medicine. And George's parents very rightly said medicine could be dangerous. You don't touch it. Only adult supervision should you ever take medicine. But I think George's parents need to have another chat with George. And part of the topic work is to look into different substances that we put on our body, on our face, like makeup or sun cream. Are they dangerous? Are they not? So I'd like you to have just a little chat with your family and see if you think actually there's other dangerous substances, things that can really hurt you, and not just medicine. Okay, let's have a look at our English. So George's Marvellous Medicine is full, jam-packed of onomatopoeia. Onomatopoeia, they're noisy words that sound similar to the meaning. So examples would be bang. The word bang sounds like the bang of a firework. Or possibly fizz. The word fizz, it almost sounds like the fizzing of pop. So, bronze, I would like you to go through the extract, and can you colour in or highlight all the words that are noisy onomatopoeia words, noisy words. And then silver, on Hub, there's an onomatopoeia worksheet. I want you to match as many noisy words to the pictures on the first page. So come up with your words that fit those pictures, that sound like its meaning, actually words that sound like the sound itself. And gold, I said here complete the rest of the worksheet. There's 3 more pages. That's an additional challenge. Really, for gold, I just want you to do the first, the next 2 pages. So let's go into. So in Hub, if you click into literacy, and it's under George's Marvellous Medicine. So very quickly, I'm just going to give you a little bit of help with the bronze. So that's this one here. So which of these words sound like its actual meaning, sound like the action it's describing? Fiery broth and witch's brew, foamy froth and rich's blue, fume and spume and spoondrift spray, fizzle, swizzle, shout hooray! Watch it sloshing, swashing, sploshing, hear it hissing, squishing, spissing. Grandma better start to pray. So think of these words like slosh, sloshing. Sounds a little bit like the water sloshing. Hooray! It sounds like, your hooray, your excitement. So look at these different words. And which ones do you think actually sound like its meaning? So that's bronze. And then the rest of the worksheet can be found here. and you see these little pictures. So write a word to describe the sound that you hear. So I'll do the first one. So that's a bell, so it could be clanging or ring. It might be like a ring or a ding. So there could be more than one answer. And think of the noise that a dog makes. Is there a word to describe that? So that's silver. And then moving on. Says link a word in list 1 to a word in list 2 that has a similar meaning. Put a circle around the word in each pair that would show you have used onomatopoeia. An example is done for you. I love the word onomatopoeia, by the way, it just rolls off the tongue. In my top 10 words next to discombobulated. So it's giving you an example. And it's circled bang because that's an onomatopoeia word that's similar to hit. So, done a line from hit to bang because they mean something similar, and circled the word that is using onomatopoeia. And that's it. There's an additional challenge. If you want to complete the rest of the worksheet, feel free. So, using onomatopoeia, put words into these sentences, so they get an understanding of what's happening. So the strong wind, what outside the house? Clash, possibly. And then the last one, use these onomatopoeic words in a sentence. And this might actually help you for the third section, so you might want to do this one first. So it gives you a few words like boom, flutter, prickle, whoosh, soft squeak. So you can actually magpie these words and use them for that section. Right, well, that's this week's story. We will continue this possibly next week, or perhaps the week after. I hope everyone is doing okay, and look after yourselves.